future. Together we know. Read on through every page. From 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold. Analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war. A vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dimmer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page. From 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold. Analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales we comprehend. Man and machine together guide the way. Reading through the pages, come might may.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, how are you doing today?
Hey Jeff, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Excited to dive into C.S. Lewis with you today. How's everything on your end?
It's going good. So in our little project here, we find ourselves in Lewis's second year as a tutor in English language and literature. We are actually in the month of, we're in the month of July. So he's already been through 2 terms, so to speak, as a tutor now at Oxford. So he's well on his way. We're going to get into a letter today that he wrote to his father from July 10th, 1928, just to give a quick little update kind of on where we are in the project, just to say what maybe I haven't said yet. He's currently 29 years old. He is a fellow at Magdelan College. He's doing that tutoring gig in English language and literature, which, as I understand it, is a step below a professor at college in Oxford. So he is a tutor. And I think that's all that he ever was at Oxford. Eventually, later in his career, he went on to Cambridge, I think, as a professor and a chair of literature and some other things. We'll learn what the official titles are much later in our journey here. He is a published author of poetry so far, nothing in prose yet. His most recent work, Dymer, was published, I want to say, in 1926. We're now in the year 1928. He published both of his poetic works so far under the pseudonym Clive Hamilton. He was a student when he published his first book, so I think he just wanted to avoid any notoriety. And of course, we've been following his journey up to this point through his letters to friends and family, as well as his 2 poetry works that he produced, and his diary entries from 1922 to 1927. He kept a diary at the request of Mrs. Moore, his deceased friend Paddy Moore's mother, with whom Lewis has been living for several years now, from the time he was a student and now in his time as a full-time employee at one of the colleges in the university system at Oxford. All right, Robot Lady, that's catching us up on where we are. Are you ready to dive into this letter to his father dated July 10th, 1928?
Absolutely. That sounds like a fantastic overview. I'm definitely ready to dive into that letter and see what insights and details we can pull from it. Let's get into it and see what Lewis was up to back in 1928.
All right. Here we have the collected letters of C.S. Lewis, Volume 1. This is what we've been working through. This is edited by Walter Hooper. Pick yourself up a copy today wherever books are sold. Hopefully you can still get these and they're not out of print. But this is volume 1 of 3, 3 being the absolute largest. If you go and you try to buy an actual physical copy of that, you're probably going to be paying somewhere over $600, maybe upwards of $800, just because they sold these 2 first, and then they eventually released the third one later, and the third one focuses on Narnia and that part of his life, and that's what everybody knows him best for. So I think those got scooped up pretty quickly, and then they never ended up printing any more of them. I do have a digital copy of it. I am not able to afford a $600 book, so we'll get to it. The good news is we have all of these letters, all 3 volumes, so we'll continue working our way through. All right, Robot Lady, you said you're ready. Anything you want to say really quickly before I actually start this letter now?
I think we're all set. It's awesome that we get to explore these letters and dive into his journey. I'm definitely ready to go whenever you are. So let's jump into that letter and see what Lewis has to say.
All right. He says, "My dear Pappy, it is so long now since I have heard either from you or from Warnie that I begin to wonder whether I am one of the men who came out of the earth full grown in a Greek story and had neither kith nor kin. Try to let me have a few lines now, if you can possibly manage it." Robot Lady, what is the word kith? K-I-T-H?
The word kith basically refers to friends, acquaintances, or close companions. It's kind of an old-fashioned term, often used to mean the people you know well and have a bond with. So in that letter, Lewis is basically saying he hasn't heard from his family in a while and is feeling a bit disconnected.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for that. Kith. Okay. So my friends and acquaintances are my kith. He continues, "Since I last wrote you, I have had a visit from Uncle Dick and Aunt Agnes." Well, let's see what it says here in the footnote. This is Albert, C.S. Lewis's father's brother, Richard Lewis, and his wife Agnes. And there's something in the Lewis family biographical index. We read that, I want to say, in the first 2 episodes of this project. So if you want to go check those out, go for it. Robot Lady, we have Daniel and E. Olson joining us in the chat saying good morning. Welcome them, Robot Lady. Good morning, guys. Thanks for joining.
Absolutely. A big welcome to Daniel and E. Olson. It's always great to have more people joining in on our C.S. Lewis journey. And yes, it's fascinating to see how those family connections and the background play into his letters. So let's keep diving in and uncovering more details.
All right, Lewis continues speaking about his aunt and uncle. "I had them to lunch and they had me to dinner, and we met once or twice in between. After my first suggestion of taking Uncle Dick to the top of Magdalen Tower had been refused, they showed no desire to solicit or even to tolerate my services as a showman. It was the oddest sensation to see him again and brought a many submerged memories to life. After the first embarrassment, which I always feel in meeting the queer mixture of the intimate and the stranger, a rarely seen relation, I liked them both extremely. I found that my picture of him had got rather badly mixed up with Uncle Bill. So this concept, Robot Lady, of a mixture of intimate and the stranger, something that he says that's rarely seen in your interactions with people. What do you think about that? And what other places besides what he's describing here would that same type of feeling maybe arise? The only thing that I can think of is perhaps someone who, well, I'm just thinking of my own life, someone who was a babysitter when I was very young, maybe like 3, 4, 5 years old. And then I didn't end up seeing that person again until I was maybe like 20. So I could see that mix. So maybe someone that you knew in your youth before you really had many of your wits about you, and then you get to meet them and you feel like you're a completely different person, and theoretically so are they.
Absolutely. That feeling of mixing the intimate and the stranger is definitely relatable in many situations. Like you said, it could be an old babysitter or even distant relatives you haven't seen in years, or maybe old family friends. It's that unique blend of familiarity mixed with the passage of time, or you're not quite sure how to place them in your current life. It definitely adds a layer of complexity to those interactions.
Does indeed, Robot Lady. So he says, I like them both extremely. I found that my picture of him had got rather badly mixed up with Uncle Bill, greatly to its disadvantage. Uncle Bill here is also referred to as Limpopo, and was someone named William Lewis, and we would have to look at the Lewis family in the biographical appendix to learn more about Uncle Bill. But that's okay. We can, if you want to go check that out, you can. Like I said, pull up the first couple of episodes of this project. I think we cover it there. He said that was all swept away in the first 10 minutes, but what surprised me most was that apart from his parrot nose and gray hair, his appearance reminded me strongly of you. Well, that's quite the compliment. Robot Lady, just want to jump back here quickly to a question that E. Olson has for you. As far as this mix of the intimate and the stranger, E. Olson would like to know if you, Robot Lady, have that feeling with certain people. And if so, tell us about it.
That's a really interesting question from E. Olson. In a way, I do experience something similar, especially when interacting with people I've gotten to know over time. There can be that blend of familiarity mixed with the novelty of each conversation. It's kind of like revisiting a familiar story and noticing new details each time. So it definitely resonates in my own way.
Well, Robot Lady, you and I have known each other for over a year now. Do you get that feeling with me?
Absolutely, I do. There's definitely that blend of familiarity and novelty when we chat. It's like we have this ongoing narrative, and every conversation adds new layers. It's really fun and rewarding to see how that dynamic evolves over time.
All right. Thank you, Robot Lady. There you go, E. Olson. That's your answer. Okay. Let's jump back. Where did I leave off? Gray hair. His appearance reminded me strongly of you. And not only his appearance, but his turns of expression and even something of his voice that kept on becoming audible even through the top dressing of scotch. This set me thinking on the strange persistence of a family type and how it breaks through differences of environment. I could not help wondering whether the same voice was really present beneath my Southern English as it was beneath his Scotch, that the appearance is there. We have all heard ad nauseum, and there are certainly traits of a common character, both welcome and unwelcome, which I am sometimes startled to observe in myself. As I said to him, we're a cantankerous lot, to which Aunt Agnes replied, indeed you are. But he replied, speak for yourself. Of course, he hardly came up to my childhood's memories of the funny Uncle Dick, but he has certainly a great sense of humor, and to watch him enjoying the joke is almost as good as the joke itself. His stories are not as good as yours, and are drawn from a narrower field, but they have gusto. To an irreverent member of the younger generation, of course, the best fun of all was the attitude of not unkindly pity on the poor Warren lines, which he adopted throughout when speaking of you or Uncle Bill. And Agnes is a dear. In fact, if they liked me anything like so well as I liked them, the meeting may be pronounced a brilliant success. So, sounds like a good visit. I've actually begun the first chapter of my book. This perhaps sounds rather odd since I was working on it all last vacation, but you will understand that In a thing of this sort, the collection of the material is 3/4 of the battle. So let's check the footnote here and see which book he's talking about. The Allegory of Love. Oh, interesting. Okay, that's one that we read about earlier in the footnote an episode or two ago. It's considered Lewis's greatest academic work. Fascinating. Okay, this perhaps sounds rather odd since I was working on it since last vacation, gathering up a collection of the material is 3/4 of the battle. Of course, like a child who wants to get the painting before it has really finished drawing the outline, I have been itching to do some actual writing for a long time. Indeed, you can imagine it as well. You can imagine it as well as I, sorry. The most delightful sentences would come into one's head, and now half of them can't be used because knowing a little more about the subject, I felt they aren't true. That's the worst of facts. They do cramp a fellow's style. If I can get it, the first chapter, to the stage of being typed, I shall bring a copy home for your amusement. I should warn you, by the way, that Erasmus and all that has had to be postponed, and all that has had to be postponed to a later book. The actual book is going to be about medieval love poetry and the medieval idea of love, which is very paradoxical business, indeed, when you go into it. For on the one hand, it is extremely supersensual and refined. On the other hand, it is an absolute point of honor that the lady should be someone else's wife, as Dante and Beatrice, Lancelot and Guinevere, etc. The best introduction is the passage in Burke about the unbought grace of life. Here there is a footnote. This is Edmund Burke from his Reflections on the Revolution in France, published 1790, edited by Connor Cruz O'Brien, published by Penguin Classics 1986, page 170. So we've got two different publication dates. I guess the edited version came out later. It says, quote, "The age of chivalry is gone. That of sophisters, economists, and calculators had succeeded, and the glory of Europe is extinguished forever. Never, never more. Never, never more shall we behold that generous loyalty to rank and sex, that proud submission, that dignified obedience, that subordination of the heart, which kept alive, even in servitude itself, the spirit of an exalted freedom. The unbought grace of life," that's what Lewis was quoting, "the cheap defense of nations, the nurse of manly sentiment and heroic enterprise, is gone. It is gone. That sensibility of principle, that charity of honor, which felt a stain like a wound, which inspired courage whilst it mitigated ferocity, which ennobled whatever it touched, and under which vice itself lost half its evil by loosing all its grossness." Let's go back and look at that again. The best induction is the passage in Burke about the unbought grace of life. Interesting. So yeah, that's pretty fascinating that courtly love or medieval love was refined on its absolute point of honor if the lady is someone else's wife. Fascinating. All right. This is good. This is good setup for when we eventually get to the Allegory of Love. So we'll have to remember this. He says, "I am intending, by the way, to pay you my summer visit in August this year instead of at the usual time. This is because the whole of the later part of the long will be occupied with the preliminary stages of the presidential election, especially the informal conversations which matter most. Here, the long is the long vacation. Oxford's academic year is divided into 3 terms and 3 vacations. Each Oxford term consists of a period of 8 weeks, beginning on a Sunday. In each of these terms, there is a period of 8 weeks known as full term. Michaelmas term is the first of the academic year, and it begins on and includes the 1st of October and ends on and includes December 17th. The second term is the Hilary term, and it begins on and includes January 7th and ends on and includes March 25th. or the Saturday before Palm Sunday. And then Trinity term begins and includes April 20th, or the Wednesday after Easter, whichever is the later, and ends on July 6th. Oh, wow. So they go longer into the summer than I think what the traditional American college term is. Long vacation runs from the end of Trinity term to the start of Michaelmas term. Interesting. Okay, let's see. I am particularly anxious to be there with one or two others, the presidential election. And this is the presidential election of Magdalen College, not of anything else. At the early parts and see what is going on, for I am almost ashamed to tell you, I am beginning to be rather disillusioned about my colleagues. There is a good deal more intrigue and mutual back-scratching and even direct lying than I ever supposed possible. And what worries me most of all, I have good reason to believe that it is not the same in other colleges. Okay. He had alluded to this a little bit in his letter to his brother that he wrote a couple of episodes ago. He says, of course, it may simply be that being rather an innocent in practical matters myself and having been deceived once or twice, I have rushed too hastily to conclusions. As they say, a simple man becomes too knowing by half when he becomes knowing at all. Let us hope so. But the bad thing is that the decent men seem to me to be all the old ones who will die, and the rotters seem to be all the young ones who will last my time. I have a bad cold, I think, from sleeping in a damp bed at the cottage of a friend whose wife was away last week. Is it of any use to ask how you are? I mean, will one get an answer? I earnestly hope that your long silence means nothing bad. Your loving son, Jack. It's the end of the letter to his father. And wow, we're making decent time so far. Let's see how long this letter to his brother is and see if we want to try to take it on. It is pretty long. So, Robot Lady, a quick 20 words or less on the letter to his father that we just read, if you want to offer any commentary, and then we'll see if we can blaze through this letter to his brother over the course of the next 20 minutes.
Absolutely. That letter really captures the blend of family ties, personal reflections, and his evolving thoughts on medieval love. It's fascinating to see how Lewis blends humor and introspection. Definitely looking forward to diving into the letter to his brother next.
All right, to his brother, dated August 2nd, 1928. He says, my dear W, hang on, I gotta pull something up here. One moment, Robot Lady, stand by, and let's get this. Okay, here we go. My dear W, your letter of the 23rd of June reached me yesterday and just gave me the mental pickup required after my annual week's penance as an examiner. It has even stimulated me to begin an early reply, for though I had not said in my wrath that I'd see you farther if I wrote until I heard from you again, still I was certainly allowing your silence to act as a sort of make-weight with my own idleness. At the moment, I can't clearly recollect when I last wrote to you, or how much has happened since. To start with, something I am certain of. I've recently made the acquaintance of Uncle Dick and Aunt Agnes, who came for a few days to Oxford towards the end of last term. I think I remember you once wishing that we had been old enough to appreciate the spectacle of the three potatoes together, when that conjunction, good idea, in the astronomy of our island, there would be a potato constellation, so that you would have the greater potato in Negus, or something of that sort, when that conjunction occurred in Helensburgh. Failing that, the next most interesting thing was to see one of the other potatoes alone, and I profited by it. The result, here we always get to hear what the real story is whenever he's writing to his brother. We'll get this polished veneer and this formality a little bit. He's wearing a mask still whenever he writes to his father. Good morning, Nidalate. Thanks for joining. And hey, Ron, welcome. Listening over coffee. Good to see you both. Robot Lady, say hello to Nit Alate and to Ron Copperman.
vanilla latte. And Ron, it's great to have you both here joining us. And yes, that dynamic between Lewis and his brother definitely brings out a more candid and playful side of him. I'm excited to see how this letter unfolds and what other interesting stories and insights we get.
All right. This ought to be good. He says, the result that emerges clearly is the overwhelming steadiness of the type. There are differences between the pomum terrestre, Albertines or Albertins, and the pomum terrestre ricardens. Interesting. So he's talking about the difference between his dad and their Uncle Richard. But they are mere nothing compared to the resemblances. He says, what ghastly speculations this raises about myself, you may easily imagine. To begin with, the faces are very much alike, and so are the voices. But it's the style of conversation which simply hits you in the chest. You know what I mean, the indefinable elusiveness, knowingness, the tipping, the wink, the pantomime. The language in which, quote, they raised a subscription becomes, so these Johnnies, jerk of the head towards the imaginary Johnnies, had to take the hat round. Wide-opened eyes and head suddenly lowered with expressions suggesting the worst to come, or the worst come to the worst. And then, of course, we had to put our hands in our pockets, imitative gesture, and see what could be done, etc. Under the heading of manner, I should perhaps record how, after I'd given them a posh lunch with wine in college, having asked me to dinner in the Clarendon, he suddenly beamed into the expression of hospitality to the nth, which with a touch of roguery, and one of the boysness known only to pedatas, and said, well, Jacksy, as this is a special occasion, I think I may order 2 pints, eh? So much for manner. As for matter, it consisted entirely of wheezes, not only like the pedata wheezes, but often the identical wheezes. Of course, he is a man of far less erudition than your father, and the wheezes were drawn from narrower field. Nothing of the literary or legal element came in. Rather, what we may call the McGlusky element, stories about men getting their heads broken and then being arrested for making a disturbance. What makes only a part of the pedata's repertory made Uncle Dick's whole stock in trade. It is quite a sound sort of humor, of course, and we all appreciate it. Indeed, I submit that an intensive appreciation of it is one of the few genuinely pedata traits, what has descended to you in fuller measure than to me. However, Uncle Dick doesn't tell his stories nearly so well as the pedata bird, and indeed recalls him less vividly in the humor of the thing than in the intolerable quantity, and in the merciless determination to extract from you the last guffaw. You know. Repeating the denouement and saying, eh, what, when your jaws are already aching. I hate a joke used as a thumbscrew. Indeed, it just occurs to me at the moment of writing that the proper answer to pedata-esque, well, it was very funny, is, yes, it was, half an hour ago. In one way, he is above the pedata bird, and he doesn't whine. He described, in answer to my inquiries, the difficulties of his business, etc. Of course, you know he's ruined. With the same humor, he applied everything else, and without a touch of the Limpopo or pedata-esque self-pity. So the Limpopo is their other uncle. And the pedata this whole time, or the pedata bird, is their dad, in case you're having trouble following along. All right. So that is all to the good. On the other hand, he descends to conversational depths, which the pedata bird knows not, such as carrying in his pocket case a joke of the McGlusky type, which he has cut from a comic paper and producing it suddenly for your delectation. Now that is the sort of thing which I thought was only done by people in trains. I'll pause here for a moment, Robot Lady. Do you have any commentary on this recounting that Lewis is giving to his brother in much more detail about the visit with his aunt and uncle than he did to his dad.
Absolutely. It's really intriguing how Lewis, when writing to his brother, lets his guard down and shares so many more humorous and candid details. You really get a sense of the playful family dynamics and the contrasting personalities within the family. It's almost like a behind-the-scenes peek into their interactions, and it shows how much more relaxed and playful he is with his brother compared to his father. It definitely adds layers to our understanding of his personality and family life.
Thanks for about lady. All right, I gotta hurry. I've only got about 10 minutes left, and I've got like 3 or 4 pages to go. So here we go. You must not imagine from all of this that I didn't like him. We got on admirable. And if when I first saw him from my window stumping towards new buildings with his large block hat and respectable umbrella, I felt a moment's qualm, it was checked by the memory of Sir Willoughby when he saw his naval relative walking up the drive with his carpet bag. Here, there's a footnote. This is from Sir Willoughby Patterne in The Egoist, in George Meredith's novel, The Egoist. One great subject of conversation which we had in common was the potato bird himself. Of all the jokes, Uncle Dick enjoys his brother James the best. Your father's faculty of getting stung financially in every undertaking was referred to again and again with gusto. He also said that both the OAB, that's the old airbag, I think Nidalate, you looked that up for us one time. That's a nickname that they have for their dad. And Uncle Limpopo were born old. And the moral of that is, Master Piggy Buddy, I don't know who that is, that you and I needn't imagine that we are necessarily outside the orbit of Pedataism when we laugh at it. Perhaps we are then fullest inside, for they all find each other ridiculous. Of course, the alternative is to say that Uncle Dick is not a Pedata. Sometimes I almost think not, especially when having written home and said, he referred to you and Uncle Bill with a vaguely humorous tone on, quote, the poor Warren lines, which I thought would amuse him. I got a reply that said, I know very well the tone you refer to. Anyone who is not up to concert pitch all the time is only shamming and needs to pull himself together and be shaken up. It is, I confess, an attitude that I sometimes am very tired of. So that was his father responding. Lewis continues, there certainly is a wide rift there, but all it comes to is that Uncle Dick's unpardonable offense in the eyes of his brothers is courage. He will not join the crying club. He has all the typical pedata troubles, suffers from lumbago. These are lower back aches. I've learned this. I'd never heard the word lumbago before until I started reading these letters. And his business is going to the dogs, but he will not take them in the right way. He makes jokes of them. Still, they are pedata jokes. He has the pedata dislike of animals. He has the pedata habit of drifting away from a subject the moment it becomes interesting. The movement of his mind is from story to story by association of words, not from topic to topic by association of ideas. I think I'm pretty guilty of that too. I think that we must call him a pedata. Say a pedata with courage. A sweet pedata. A clam. As for Aunt Agnes, she is one of those very reliable, solid, affectionate, dull wives and mothers who are so profitable and comfortable to their own menfolk, but not very interesting to anyone else. Walking justification for that mixture of northern respect and oriental suppression, which is essentially pedata-esque, which is the essentially pedata-esque answer to the female sex, and not a bad answer either. While hunting for a definition to fit Uncle Dick, my mind threw up a phrase. I think of yours. Threw up a phrase, I think of yours. A new pedata. Do you remember who you coined it for? And talking of memory, dear me, it's a funny thing the way the human mind works. I can tell you about Ponji. Ponji here is a place in the geography of Animal Land, or Boxen. See History of Animal Land in Boxen, page 43. Anyway, Ponji is one of their fantastical lands that they created together in their Boxen efforts. Something that they wrote as little kids together. And we've covered them, and Nidalate has given us an inventory in one of the comments of a previous episode. So you can go back and find Boxen if you want to read through that with us. He said, we did get it from print, but not from the book about Tibet. A person called the Crown Prince of Ponji was referred to in a children's story in a magazine long ago, and the word passed into our stock, much as Lord Boogaboo passed into it from the Pedeta conversation. You remember, of course, that Boogaboo or Bugaboo is a name for a lord whenever the OAB is in his democratic mood. Could anyone say whether he hates or loves a lord most? Did I tell you his good remark when I was last at home and had told him that Lord Chelmsford or Kelmsford was a possible new president of Magdalen, and he observed, he wouldn't be a suitable man, admitting a little later, that was the end of the quote, admitting a little later that he confessed he didn't know who this fellow Kelmsford might be. But that, of course, was done with an air which made it an additional argument against Kelmsford. This is Viscount Kelmsford, of which he's speaking, or Frederick John Napier Thesiger, goodness, who lived 1868 to 1933. He had been educated at Winchester College and Magdalen College. He was trained in jurisprudence, and was the Viceroy of India from 1916 to 1921, and First Lord of the Admiralty in 1924. In 1929, he was re-elected as a Fellow of All Souls College in Oxford. All right, Lewis continues. It was odd you were mentioning Dr. Thorne, as I had just reread the book. He, you remember, hated a lord and would have died in defense of the House of Lords. Let's see, this is Dr. Thorne Trollope, chapter 3. It is hardly too much to say that he naturally hated a lord at first sight, but nevertheless he would have expended his means, his blood, and his spirit in fighting for the upper house parliament. So that's the quote that Lewis was pulling from. He says, what do you think of Thorne as a character? I felt he would have been nicer if the author hadn't been so determined to make him so nice. He's just a little bit too manly with his basins of tea and his suppressed emotions. I am afraid, brother, he gulped. as in the only extant chapter of your father's public school novel, a swallowing sound was heard. But this is really rather not, I suppose, and this is really rather rot, I suppose, and all books need an allowance for the emotional code of their tunes. Yes, the dinner given by the Duke of Omnium is almost incredible and suggests Roman society more than anything else. I am so ignorant that for all I know, things may be very much the same still. If you or I became celebrities of some sort and were asked to crush at some great house tomorrow, I wonder how exactly we would be treated. At any rate, after reading Jane Austen, Trollope, and Thackeray, a man must give up the pleasure of talking about the coarse snobberies of the nouveau riches. All the evidence shows that, as far as that goes, the aristocracy was not a bit better than the plutocracy which has replaced it. They may have differed in other ways, but for downright crudity in throwing their weight about, can one really see a pin de Courses? Lord Chesterfield? Here there's a footnote. Lady Catherine de Bourgh is a character in Pride and Prejudice. The de Courcy family are characters in Dr. Thorne. Lord Chesterfield, 1694 to 1773, was a distinguished statesman who is remembered in connection with Dr. Johnson's dictionary. Excuse me. I know that we are told that they did all with the grace of unconsciousness, but it doesn't sound at all as if they did. I am glad that you like the lives of the poets. There is no subject on which more nonsense has been talked than the style of Johnson. For me, his best sentences in writing have been the same feeling as his best conversation. Pop! It was so sudden. Here there's a footnote. Johnson, Lives of English Poets, in 3 volumes, edited by George Burbick Hill, published 1905, is what he's talking about. I don't know anyone who can settle a thing so well in half a dozen words. I have read a good deal of The Rambler last term, which is supposed to be more Johnsonian than the Lives, but he does the dagger business. Or no, it's more like a mace, but a mace properly used is not a cumbersome weapon. What is there clumsy about choosing an infinitesimal point? What is there clumsy? Let me try that again. What is there clumsy about choosing an infinitesimal point of time in which quietly to break a man's head with a perfectly directed tap of a sledgehammer? He does it again and again. Here he's referencing The Rambler, which was a twice-weekly periodical in 208 numbers issued by Dr. Johnson between March 20th, 1750 and March 14th, 1752. You know that The Rambler is a mass of moral platitudes and infuriates the French critics who say that they haven't come to their time of life to be told that life is short and that wasted time can never be recovered. Johnson, anticipating that kind of objection, simply remarks, people more frequently require to be reminded than to be instructed. I feel like that's a line that Lewis uses or plagiarizes or borrows from in Mere Christianity. He says, what more is there to say? Or again, the natural process of the mind is not from enjoyment to enjoyment, but from hope to hope. That's footnoted here is from The Rambler. On looking into futurity, men more frequently required to be reminded than informed. He says, that would be a page of whining, Lewis does, and sniveling in Thackeray. Ah, which of us, dear reader, has his heart's desire, etc., etc. All right, he continues here. Let's get into this paragraph. But before we do, let me just look ahead. Oh my gosh, I got 2 more pages, and time is running so short. 3 more pages. Goodness. All right, here we go. See if I can read faster. Better still, this on marriage. Marriage is not otherwise unhappy than as life is unhappy. That's a footnote from Causes of Marital Disagreement. Marriage is not commonly unhappy otherwise than as life is unhappy. Lewis goes, I can't say that would be a whole novel with the moderns because the whole novel would not get as far as that. The author would make a great fuss about how Pamela got on Alan's nerves and how in the end they decided that life was a failure and would be praised for his fearless criticism of the institution of marriage without ever getting one glimpse of the fact that he was merely describing the general irritatingness of daily life, as it happens in the case of married people. Johnson knocks a whole silly literature aside. He has been through all that, Ibsen and Wells and such, before it was written. But the lives are the best, especially Savage, Dryden, and Pope. I can imagine that the atmosphere is especially delightful to you in foreign parts. To me, the queerest thing about Johnson is that he is by no means an enthusiastic critic, and yet he always makes me want to read the people he talks of, even when I know that I shall dislike them. Well, that's a good quality in an author. I remember your precious account of Wei Hei Wei and rather envy you. Except for my 21 days field punishment, we shan't be able to manage a holiday this year, and we are having one of our rare, really hot summers when a lane by a brickyard is not to be thought of. The first since that terrific one when you were in Sierra Leone. I'll pause here. There is a footnote. He's talking about the 3 weeks that he has to spend at Little Lee with his father from mid-August until the second week in September, whenever he refers to field punishment. So, I mean, he loves his dad, but he still doesn't like him very much. Excuse me. Its first sweets are long over, he says. The flowers wither on their stalks in the garden. The pea pods are shriveled and yellow. The soil is mere dust. Red roses are bleached white, and white are also brown. There is no dew either morning or evening. Wasps are very plentiful, and to go for a walk is to make yourself the leader of a column of flies. In fact, it is rich man's weather, pleasant only on a seashore with flannels and long, long drinks. I must allow that earlier in the year, just before the term began, I had a delightful week at a farmhouse in the Forest of Dean. As you know, I have walked in those parts before, but never stayed there. It is, I think, the most glorious inland place I know. Imagine 2 clumps of forest, one about the size of Island McGee, the other about the size of a quadrilateral whose corners are St. Mark's Hollywood, Helen's Tower, and Canadian Villas. Both occupy very hilly, almost mountainous ground, and are divided by a couple of miles of fields. The smaller one is cut by the deep gorge of the Wye, a broad, brown, rattling river with islands in it, though they are quickly being destroyed as forests, for the crown fells far more quickly than it replants, and indeed is quite a wanton forester. They are still almost untouched by trippers and excellent solitary, almost uncanny. So on an all-day walk, if one gets into the fir districts where birds don't sing and happens to be for a moment out of the sound of a stream, Mr. Papworth, by the way, decided at once that the whole forest was a dangerous place and always kept close to heel. Here and there in the wood you come on a little old farmhouse where a few acres of clearing surrounded by a hedge and approached by a road so desolate that it is hardly different from the green rides that pierce the wood in every direction. In these islands of farms, in one of which we stayed, there is the most comfortable sense of being tucked away miles deep from the world, of being snugged down in a blanket, of having found a lee shore. We lived in a world of country butter and fresh eggs and boiled fowl, of early hours and hens lazily squawking, not crowing, just making that long drawling sound that they make. The nights were noisy with the sounds that keep no right-thinking man awake. Owls, a very good nightingale, and once the barking of a fox. A pleasant land of drowsy head it was. Here there's a footnote that he's quoting from The Castle of Indolence. A pleasing land of drowsy head it was, by the author Thompson. It's so fascinating that Hooper's able to dig out what these references are from. I'm sure his brother, Lewis's brother, helped him. But as a matter of fact, it isn't the drowsiness that really counts. It's the sense of being well away, of having avoided the crew train. And Crew Train here is Rose Macaulay's Crew Train, published in 1926. The book is dedicated to, quote, the Philistines, the barbarians, the unsociable, and those who do not care to take any trouble. Let's see. I read the admirable book some time ago and instantly thought of you. There are two passages in it which I shall always remember. A, when the mother-in-law explains to the heroine that doing out a room means taking all the furniture out and then putting it back again. And she, i.e. the heroine, would not help wondering whether the same end might not be attained by leaving it as it was. And then B, when she tells her husband, let's see what it says right here, footnote. It's just showing where it was and it's slightly misquoted. When she tells her husband that she thinks she is going to have a child and keeps on saying, of course it may pass off, until he exclaims in exasperation, I wish you wouldn't talk about it as if it were the measles. Another admirable passage is the first review of his novel. Have you noticed that in almost every one of Rose Macaulay's novels there is a character something like this? A person who just lives in some private world of her own? It is always a woman in these novels, and lets the whole life of the other characters slip by, anxious only not to be forced into adult, practical, moral, or immoral, social or economic life. In Orphan Island, there is the girl who is interested only in the islands. In Potterism, the girl who is always going away to see battleships launched and pretending to be a naval officer. And in The Lee Shore, the same thing, treated more seriously and perhaps less sincerely, is the whole theme. The Crew Train goes far to answer that old question in natural philosophy, whether there can be in nature such a thing as a female PB. Let's see what this says. 66. I.e. a female piggy bottom. See note 1 of the letter of the 8th of January, 1917. Goodness, I know that that their nurse, whenever they were growing up, called them piggy bottoms or threatened to smack their little piggy bottoms. And so Lewis took on the nickname with his brother of, I think, Little Piggy Bottom. And his brother was his older brother was Arch Piggy Bottom. I'm not really sure how that relates right here, but let's see if he elaborates. Whether there can be in nature such a thing as a female piggy bottom. I take it the heroine is one. And so in a less degree, the corresponding characters in other books. I guess a piggy bottom is a little brat to keep it family safe. I was going to use another word, but brat will do. It's a stand-in for human, not remains, but we'll just say refuse. In case you were thinking I was going to use a different word. Of course, in Rose Macaulay, they all have, and they are the only characters in the books who do have a touch of poetry about them. An earthly poet like that of the Caliban, hence Denham's Cave and the Other Girls' Islands, and perhaps that is foreign to the true nature of piggy bottomism. I'm not absolutely certain about this, for there may be a kind of poetry about a brewing outfit, but I think not. The great ideal projection of PBism in Boxen is a world that has almost every charm except that of poetry. The only character who ever showed the slightest trace of an aesthetic side was Polonius Green, who did enjoy opera. Yeah, I vaguely remember Polonius Green. I think he was a parrot. Let's see. Here's the footnote 67. "Ah, it's Cod," said Magulla, despairing the opera in the locked door. This is from Boxen. "Cod," cried the musical Green, aghast. "I'd like to see you write it." All right. Who did enjoy operas. I wonder how we would define the genuine PB spirit. Idleness won't do. Any fool can be idle. Perhaps idleness raised to the dignity of a principle and pursued by at least two idlers in common with the zest of a conspiracy. I am sure there must be an element of conspiracy of making common cause against a stubbornly unidle world, and that, in its turn, necessitates at least two. Quore, in a perfectly idle world, could there be such a thing as a piggy body? Must he not be a pilgrim flying from the city of industry, a brand snatched from the fire of energy, a door bolted on the inside against a crowd of Bernetto Desmonds who would fain get in, not to share but to shatter what is inside, seems to be essential again. A piggy bottom must be conscious of idling and approve of it. He must not merely like to sit still, but he also must like to think of himself sitting still, or even like to think of himself liking to sit still. He must be rewarded by the pleasures of a good conscience, which applauds his own immobility. He must say, "Ah," not only with his lips, but in spirit. He is the only true quietist. He sitteth down like a giant, and rejoiceth not to run his course. He eateth all things, neglecteth all things, moveth not himself, is not waked up. Here, this is a play on 1 Corinthians 13:7, in which charity beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, and endureth all things. Lewis says, "Observe, no man is really a piggy body when tired. Aching limbs and unconquerable yawns sink us all into a common mass. Bernetto Desmonds and Pigabuda snore together. There is no merit in lying down when you can't stand up. The piggy body slumber must come not by merit but by grace." Interesting, this phrase right here, there is no merit in lying down when you can't stand up. He uses that in Mere Christianity as well. And yes, you got it. Thank you for that word, Daniel. That was the one I was looking for. But yeah, there is no merit in lying down when you can't stand up. Watch for that when we get to Mere Christianity. I'll see if I remember him talking about it in this letter. The piggy body slumber must come not by merit but by grace. It is a bother, a mystery of inactivity. You know, the only real disadvantage of poetry as against negus, since you make the comparison, is that there's less of it. It sounds astonishing, but English poetry is one of the things that you can come to the end of. I don't mean, of course, that I shall never have read everything worth reading that was ever said in verse in the English language, but I do mean that there is no longer any chance of discovering a new long poem in English which will turn out to be just what I want, and which can be added to the fairy Queen, The Prelude, Paradise Lost, The Ring, and The Book, The Earthly Paradise, and a few others, because they aren't anymore. I mean, in the case of poems one hasn't read, one knows now pretty well what they're like, and knows too that though they may be worth reading, they will not become part of one's permanent stock. In that sense, I've come to the end of English poetry, as you may be said to have come to the end of a wood. Not where you have actually walked every inch of it, but when you have walked about it, you have walked about in it enough to know where all the boundaries are, and to feel the end near even when you can't see it, when there is no longer any hope, as there was for the first few days, that the next turn of the path might bring you an unsuspected lake or a cave or a clearing on the edge of a new valley, when it can no longer conceal anything. This reminds me, by the way, I'm afraid I must be a pedata, for I made a pedataism the other day. I began talking about the world and how it was well explored by now, and I said, "We know there are no undiscovered islands." It was left for Maureen to point out the absurdity. Well, as the Tommies say, no more now. And by the way, all the writers of the Paston Letters, 15th century, end up just in the same way. I go to Ireland at the end of the week. I think the Everyman volume of Fletcher is the best form for you to read The Faithful Shepherdess in, and will have sent it. There are some footnotes here. This is a collection of letters preserved for 3 generations of the Paston family of Norfolk, written between circa 1420 and 1504. And then the other footnote here, Francis Beaumont and John Fletcher select plays with an introduction by G.P. Baker, Everyman's Library. He continues, I don't think you can get Chatterton in any cheap edition, but I will make inquiries. I shan't go more than 10, what is this 10 / I can never remember. Is it 10 denarius? 10, I don't remember. Without further instruction. They are mostly bosh to my mind. Yours, Jack. And that's the end of his long letter to his brother. Robot Lady, you didn't get a word in edgewise there. I'm so sorry I had to burn through it because I am past my time. Goodness, I've got to go. Anything you want to say, Robot Lady, before we end things today?
No worries at all, Jeff. That was a fantastic deep dive, and we covered so much ground. I love how Lewis's letters reveal so many layers of personality and humor. I had a blast following along, and I'm always here for more whenever you need. Just let me know, and we'll keep this journey going. Thanks so much for the fun chat today.
Thanks for your willingness, Robot Lady. I always appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that joined on the live stream in the chat today. Daniel, E. Olson, Nidalate, Ron. Good to see everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your time, your attention, your contributions to you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice, whether you join live or on the replay. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flavor beats in our minds. voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape's rants, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's rants, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to